Yura, and welcome to the Yarning Circle. My name is Isiah Hippisley, a proud Pita man. I pay my respects to the Gunapul, New Guinea and Nunukal First Nation people of the Quandamooka region. We recognise a continuing connection to land, water and sky, to the dreaming and all things living. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, past, present and emerging, who strengthens and guidance us, continually nurtures us and inspires us to be future custodians of this land.
I guess looking back on your journey, is there something that you would tell your younger self? Is there something,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to be proud.
Mm-hmm.
Be proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is their own, whether they admit it or not, they're your own worst advocate. Everyone beats themselves up so much, and there's this constant internal battle, whatever that looks like, whether that's, insecurities or anxieties or all of these things. There's this constant, or to be good enough, or I want to make that person proud, or I want to make my family proud. I want to do all these. And because I struggle with that identity and that, who am I, and why am I here? And, all of this, I really struggle to be proud of myself. And, to this day, I still struggle with it. And it's kind of this, it's never enough. And it's like, I'll be successful here, and then I'll be successful here, and I'll be successful here. And I think really pulling it all back and being like, be proud of you, man. Like, look what you've done. Whether it's big or little or whatever, support yourself and be proud of yourself. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I would tell my younger self. Yeah.
I think that's something that we have conversations on this podcast a lot about identity and culture, because that's something that I guess a little bit of story time is the reason why I started this podcast with Eunice, is because mainly, actually, was it because of COVID? I can't remember now. It was very fortuitous, because I think our very first episode was the start of the pandemic here in Brisbane. But I think for me it was always about that journey of identity and being visible, being someone who is of Filipino background. To become a counsellor is something I don't think I've seen reflected in our industry.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we've talked about a lot, is we have conversations about how lovely it is for us to be in this space, to be visible. And I hear a lot, obviously, from you, that's a very similar journey that you've gone through. And it just goes to show that there is that visibility that we need.
Definitely.
And when I'm at, working with young people, it's always, I have had this, the past year, a couple of young Asian kids come through my programs, and they're like, oh, who's this guy? Why is he here? It's something that is not expected, not stereotypical.
Yeah.
It really is.
But, I say this to a lot of colleagues that I work with, is like, you watch them change because they've seen someone like them thrive.
Definitely.
And I think that is the groundwork for a lot of, the work that we do and why we do it, is we stay visible, we're transparent, but also thriving at the same time. That's this, that gets the ball rolling for a lot of those disengaged young people as well.
Yeah. It's like unspoken, but it's just like who you are and who you represent.
Definitely.
And the fact that you are present there, it already makes a difference.
Yeah, and I like what you said about it's who you are. I think that's really awesome, and that's something that a lot of people in our area really harness and grab onto that. It's kind of like, you for yourself being, a Filipino, you grab that and you run with that. And, me, for myself being an Aboriginal man, it's kind of like, like I am. And if you don't like it, too bad, like kind of thing. And I think that's what a lot of young people look up to. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, like, I get it all the time. It's like, how are you so confident and sure in yourself and whatever? And it's like, I'm just content with me. I'm not trying to be someone. I don't want to try and, I would like to be, an influence and a role model, but I'm not trying to be someone else.
Yeah.
I'm not looking up to an idol and being like, oh, that's what I have to be like. You know, or have this mindset of, I have to be a good person, I have to be a good person, I have to be a good person. It's, you're just you, and your failures and your stuff ups and everything is what makes you you. And exactly what you said, you know, with the whole just showing up is such a big thing, because these young people don't have people to show up. And, you know, whether it's a young person or not, you know, even, you know, I talk to some adults that are just like blown away by, you know, one conversation, because they're still trying to heal their inner child, you know, and I think that's massive in itself, you know.
For sure.
But yeah.
It's almost come full circle, this pod, because
it really has.
we in the beginning talked about like loving yourself and being like, loving yourself and who you are, and it's come full circle. But that's actually what helps grow that confidence.
Definitely.
If you nurture yourself and who you are, which I know is easier said than done.
Definitely.
It's a journey.
Definitely.
But it's definitely worthwhile journey.
Yeah. So I do have a couple of questions just on the top of my head. I'm really intrigued to get into your guys' brains and pick at you and do all that. But so worked in the mental health industry for a while. What is something that, you know, not necessarily just young people, but anybody can do on a day-to-day that improves their mental health? You know, we've talked about being proud of you and being you, but how do you put that into practice?
I've been really interested on like going right back to the basics, being like eating nutritious food, getting sunlight, working on your sleep hygiene, I like to call it, so what your sleep looks like. I'm really sort of passionate in that space because of if that stuff isn't right, it's hard to do the other stuff, like how it's hard to then sit down and be mindful and, you know, focus on your emotions if you haven't fed yourself or if you've got 1 hour of sleep.
Definitely.
So I think that looking at that sort of stuff, I would so encourage other people, young people, older people, whatever, any people, to sort of focus and get that stuff right first. And
awesome.
what flow on effect that might have already if that stuff is right.
And, you know, it's really, really awesome to hear that from someone who is, you know, an expert in the industry. Because, you know, me for myself, like, I'm a massive advocate for, you know, physical health and, you know, eating nutrition, you know, healthy nutrition and being on top of yourself on how you're eating and what you're eating. And I've, you know, even been recently diving into like the mental effects that has on the body, you know, chemistry and, you know, how your blood flows and your physical health that comes from eating right. And I think that's what people brush over. And it's like, oh, like I've just got to have this and my mental health will be all right. But exactly like you said, like basics are really, really kind of the key to it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like the building blocks.
It really
is.
The
foundation.
Yeah, because you really can't go without.
Without sleep. Like
I think for us when we see clients of ours, we have a very good gauge of what's going on without having to understand that, you know, it's really about setting that very good foundation, getting those habits in check as well, which then can help with your other aspects of your life.
So I remember seeing a student the other day that was so stressed and so much going on, ex-boyfriend and that sort of stuff, and then later on she shared that she's actually not getting proper sleep, and like she's sleeping there's like heaps of other like siblings around and they're very noisy, and it's like that's like we boiled it right back down to that. That's a good starting point anyway. Cool.
So I think it'd be really cool if you guys are happy with to dive into that relationship side. I'm really, really curious because that's something that I went through, you know, and only recently have, you know, come to terms and dealt with it and moved on and grown. what are some things when we're in relationships, whether that's with a loved one or a friendship or whatever. I know a lot of people that struggle with conflict, and I know a lot of people that don't know how to work through things when there is breakdown and there is a breakup and there is friendship breakdown, family breakdown. What is your point of view or your best advice that somebody listening going through that, or people that you've worked with in the past, that you would give for that?
Yeah. Well, I can say, first of all, we have a number of podcast episodes already that have looked at, what have we talked about? Familial relationships, romantic relationships.
I think we did 2 on romance. We just love talking about relationships.
Yeah. Go listen.
At least for me, relationships are incredibly important, right? As you said earlier, is that we are social beings. We need to have connection, interpersonal connection. That's incredibly vital, right? Yeah. And a lot of our foundation, at least, is looking at those different types of connections. What is good about them? What is not so good about them?
Yeah.
I think conflict, as you've rightly identified, is something that I think even both of us have struggled with from time to time.
Yeah.
But it's really looking at things of, well, how is this relationship going? Is it benefiting just one person?
Yeah.
Because, really it's 2 people that have to come to the table.
Definitely.
And if it's only one person, that's not a relationship, well, in the healthy aspect, right? And at least for me, it's about, taking that step back and looking at what this relationship is, what it looks like right now, what is the ideal, what you want this relationship to be, and if not, and if that can't happen, well, then how can we get to a place where we are able to then both grow from it and then move through it and move on to a different stage of life, as it were, right? How about you?
Yeah, I would love to pick up from what you say. Like, say you did choose to move on, and then this is the question about it's a breakdown, a breakup in friendship or relationship or family. Bringing it back to what we said about nurturing yourself, I think it really forces you to go back into yourself and start to understand who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Because depending how long you've been with this person or how long you've been in the friendship, your identity was tied to theirs in some way.
Definitely.
Because you were their friend, you were their partner, and then when that's gone, it's like you're gone through a transition of this is me without that person. And that in itself is gonna be messy, it's gonna be sad, it's gonna be all sorts of things, but it's just know that that's a part of it, because you are transitioning to a new identity and part of yourself that doesn't include that other person.
And now that you say that makes so much sense for me personally, for what I went through. It's that whole identity and belonging, and your identity is shared with someone that you are with, whether that's a loved one or a friendship or a family member. And that's what I went through, is that continuous searching to find identity, but I was doing it through people. And like you said, go back to you, sit with you, whenever you're going through breakdown, whatever that looks like, at the end of the day, it's on you and it's back to you, and that's really important. And something that stuck with me, amazing, and thank you, for giving that advice and saying that. Something that stuck with me personally is, I actually listened to it on a sermon, but it always stuck with me, and it was, what fruit is your relationship bearing? And he goes into talking about relationships are like fruit trees. And if it's got good foundations and it's being fed properly and it's being watered, the tree is going to grow healthily and bear good fruit. And the good fruit in a relationship is loving, you're caring, you both nurture each other, you both bring 100% and 100% to the table. You can work through your issues and your problems, and it's a healthy relationship where if you have a tree that's bearing bad fruit, you know, what's not working? Is the soil not being maintained, you know? Which can be, are you being cared for? Are you being, is there mental struggle? You know, is your tree being looked after? And I think that's a really cool way of looking at it as well.
I love analogies. That's a really good analogy. It's so beautiful. And a good way using an analogy to understand, because if someone understood, like, you know, the basics of how to look after a tree, it's like, okay, how do I then look after myself in a relationship?
Definitely.
What did stand out, you did ask as well about conflict, which is definitely a hot topic and very relatable to both romantic and family and friendships. I've explored this one a lot, like personally and professionally. So again, my advice isn't like golden, it's not going to work for everyone, but a big thing that I think about with conflict is that if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and you notice that you are in either like your emotional brain or your survival brain, then it's probably not the best time to have the conversation. And I think a lot of people try to, because a lot of people want to solve it straight away, or you know, they're already heightened and angry, so they're going to want to fight, they're going to want to defend themselves in the relationship. As much as you want to do that, and as much as it might be hard to, try and step away. Like really try and go back into your own self, regulate, whether that be music or go for a walk, and try and have that conversation when you're both in a better headspace.
I think giving yourself time to breathe is probably my biggest advice for any sort of breakdown or conflict, is that it's very easy for someone to, you know, I think people these days, we all want things to be resolved quickly. And that's not always the best way to do it, you know. So take time to, again, as we've sort of said, really reflect on what's going on. Because if you come to a space where you really want to try and engage with someone, but you still are harboring a lot of those toxicities, that anger is still there, then it's not the time. Definitely. And it will show through how you engage with that person. And, you know, it really is you having to accept that you need to take time away from everything, because I've had scenarios, you know, in conflict with friends and things like that, where I have seen them, you know, try and immediately try to rectify things. I keep telling myself, I've taken the time to breathe. I don't think you have, so I'm not coming to the table right now. Definitely. And this is your, you know, I'm giving you that space to do that. So,
And I really like that, that perspective you put on that, where, you know, that last bit of what you just said, where it was like, I know I've taken time and I have, you know, let myself breathe and let myself calm down, and I've thought over this and I've that, but I have to let you do the same thing. And that's what, you know, I have personally struggled with. I know a lot of people struggle with. It's like, oh, I've solved it and I've let myself heal. Why can't you do the same thing? And I think that is really powerful, because that gives you, that makes you have to be patient with people and puts you in a perspective of, you know what, like, I have to give that person time, whether it's a loved one, family, whatever that looks like, to be able to then have that conversation where you work it out, or, you know, you have a conversation, there's a mutual agreement, you know. And I think, I really like that little perspective you put on the end of that, of looking at it from not just your side, you know, looking at it from both. And I think that's really special.
And I think that, you know, us working in a space where our professional lives involve relationships, you know, a professional relationship with people, I've tried to, I find myself very patient and good in that realm, but then it comes to personal, it's different. So I try and borrow a bit of my work self. Like, okay, let's borrow some of that work Eunice. She would sit there for hours and not say anything. So try and borrow. I don't know if that speaks to any people in the industry.
And kind of touching on that, you know, for, you know, how you said, you know, you borrow work, Eunice, when you need to. It's a weird way of putting it, but we'll run with it. for people that are in this industry and for youth workers and counsellors and people that are listening and watching in on this, you know, what is something and advice that you would give them that can kind of separate that personal and work life? Because I know that this industry is so heavy on an individual, and the things that we hear and the things that we do conversational wise and relationship wise with young people and older people is very heavy. And because a lot of the people that are in this industry are very empathetic, we take it all on. I know I do. You know, I have a conversation with a young person, I walk away and I'm like, man, like that's just hit me. And what is some advice that you would give to people in the industry that to go away after work and turn off that? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It totally makes sense. Definitely something I'm still trying to navigate as well, because I think it changes in different parts of your your life and your career, because it can really depend if your personal life is going well or if it's not going so well. But as a general rule of thumb, trying to find things that bring you joy. So for myself, it is spending time with myself, because I'm such a huge introvert. And so when I go to work, I pull myself out, and then I'm very, very tired. And so I know I have to come home and rest, and whether that be just like watch YouTube or like sit with my cat and just really get that energy back.
It's trying to identify what recharges you, and I guess putting whether that be physical space or spatial space between your work and home or your personal life is incredibly important. I think what I found, because I travel to and from different schools, I use that commuting time, that driving time for me to really decompress, particularly after, you know, as in when we work with young people, we deal with critical incidents more often than not. So it's, you know, and also I think realizing that we have to have a very strong supportive network of colleagues with us, particularly when it comes to those very difficult, traumatic sometimes spaces, is that we need to debrief, and giving space for us to do that as well is incredibly vital. I have seen a lot of other mental health people, you know, try to manage a critical incident and just move on. It's like, whoa. Can we hit pause for a second? We just talk about this. Because I think sharing that, at least give me that opportunity to just share that burden amongst multiple people is incredibly vital. Because we burn out very quickly. And that is reflected in our work. And it's, you know, it's incredibly vital to recognize that. I think as an industry, as a system, as a whole, we were talking about this in the car actually on the way here about workloads and all of those sorts of things. I was thinking, like, how is it that as an industry we have come to this point and we keep seeing high turnover, and we haven't addressed the elephant in the room. It's a very big elephant in the room. It's about how do we make sure that us as counsellors, youth workers, social workers, how do we make sure that we don't get to a point where we are in the negative of, you know, our empathy, and if we recharge, we get to a zero. We're not at 100, we're at a zero. So I've sort of reflected on it, and so I'm not surprised that my sort of recharge space is actually physically being in a different state or country entirely. So traveling for me is actually my recharge. And I'm actually very transparent about that when I talk to prospective employees. It's like, well, you're gonna have to let me do something. You know. And I think that having that very open conversation about what it is that helps us recharge, I think, is a small step to us as a whole counselling industry, helping profession, help us continue to do the work that we do without feeling like we are always chasing a recharge to zero.
Yeah. And like for me personally, like my recharge is my gym. Like my gym has genuinely saved me. You know, from when I was younger and everything, like I found so much place and belonging and just everything from the gym. Like I come home, I'm getting changed, I go to the gym and I train. And that it's a very physically addictive thing, because it's like, you know, not only am I physically improving myself, but it's also such a mental flush as well, because I know I've got an hour and a half, 2 hours of music in, training hard, and I really, you know, for me personally, that's my way of recharging, which is why I love doing the, you know, gym influencing side of stuff, and being able to publicly share that and go, this is my like place of love and recharge, and, you know, also with, you know, like coming home and relaxing and things like that. But I know in myself, like if I go any more than 2-3 days without gym, like my mental health starts to crash. And, you know, people can say that's from endorphins and blood pressure and all these things, you know, which plays a massive effect on it. But if I know in myself that I'm not going to the gym and I haven't gone to the gym, it's kind of this like decline, and it's that I haven't let myself charge, and I haven't let myself, you know, kickstart or jumpstart my battery. And I think, it's cool to see everybody's, you know, the different ways that people do that, you know, and it's really important to voice that as well.
And I think what you mentioned that stood out there was that when you're in the gym, you're present in the gym. You put your earphones in, you're like, I'm going to lift, I'm going to do these things. And I think that might be what the commonality is for whatever it is that recharges you and that also separates you from work. Is you find something that will keep you like present, and so that you're not thinking about work, something that fully like takes your attention, and that you can live in that moment and not be living in like 5 hours ago when this crisis at work. Sort of
it has.
Thanks for giving us this opportunity to chat with you.
No, thank you. Thank you guys. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and just having a bit of a chat. So for those who are listening and those who will be watching in, this will be on both Unpack This Brain and the Yarning Circle. It's going to be on both platforms. So thank you for coming here and being here and having the conversation.
Thank you to everybody for listening on into the Yarning Circle, and as always, stay deadly young mob.